Back to the eyes. With the height of the lids adjusted and the overall size of the eye adjusted, we can finally put the sclera in. The sclera is the white of the eyes. So far, our eyes have been empty, and this certainly doesn't help very much in getting a sense of the person that we are sculpting. However, I really don't like getting into the sclera before the overall placement and shape of the eyes are where I'd like them to be. You are likely going to find many different ways of sculpting eyes scattered all over the internet. I suggest you try them all and find one that suits you. This method that I'm using is highly geared towards creating naturalistic eyes that are flexible and open to change for the longest amount of time possible. The success of the eyes you sculpt are likely going to come down to where and how they've been placed within the overall structure of the portrait. The proportion of the eyes relative to the rest of the portrait and the complexity which you've been able to sculpt the lids with. Lids very often end up way too simple, and the naturalistic qualities we are chasing are most present in the lids and not in the ball of the eye itself. The ball of the eye has very little character in and of itself. We all have very similar eyeballs, obviously. They're just spheres. The makeup of our lids are, however, very different, and this changes further if the eyes look off to the right or to the left, as we discussed in the previous episode. Failing at creating a spherical ball of the eye is of course not ideal either, and we should strive to do so. But it's going to have less of an impact on the success of your work than you might be led to believe. Make sure the ball of the eye sits nicely within the lids and the eye sockets. Make sure we get the feeling that we are talking about an actual sphere here that curves backwards into the skull. This means the corners of the eye must turn back in space quite a lot. Not quite at 90 degrees to the front of the eyes, as we are not seeing the sides of the ball at the corner of the eyes, but we need to get the feeling that we are heading towards something like that something like that could happen. We really don't want the eye to feel like the ball itself is too large for the socket, and that if we were to continue our sphere, we would end up on the outside of the skull. We have to feel this turn back in space. We also really need to feel like the eyes are sitting in a natural way between the lids. As you can see here, the center of the eyeball, which is the pupil, sits further up between the lids rather than further down, for example, or in the middle. This means we see a different amount of the curvature of the eye above and below this point. We can clearly see this from the side view here. The ball of the eye must curve more towards the bottom because of this. Of course, if the gaze of the eyes were to change, this would change as well, and so we should sculpt the eyes in situ, or in the position that we intend them to be in our sculpture. To either side of the pupil, we have close to an equal amount of space, so we should expect to have a similar amount of curvature back in space. However, the inside corner of the eye sits slightly further forward compared to the outside corner of the eye, and so this means we see more of the curvature to the outside of the eye as compared to the inside. The action of filling in the ball of the eye is pretty straightforward. Because of the way we've built the eyes, we need to push clay pretty deep in there. I like to roll up a sausage of clay and slowly fill in this space little by little. This is a scenario where managing the firmness of your clay and the firmness of the clay on your sculpture is vital. You want to work with soft clay, and you want the lids and the profile representing the furthest point out or forwards on the eyeball to be fairly tough, so they don't move around while you are filling in the eyeball. Remember that the lids are very thick, so account for this. Don't fill up the eyeballs so far that they meet the lids directly, or are in line with the lids from the side view. Set the whites of the eyes slightly deeper than the eyelids, so the lids get to keep that inside edge nice and thick. You can see here from the side view again how much space exists between the lids and the eye itself. A thicker edge here is going to serve you better than one that is too thin. This is another common mistake that beginners make, that's easy enough to avoid the second you are aware of it.